Thank you. That makes me feel good. Very nice to be back here. This is my fourth time in New Orleans in the last couple of years, and I adore this place. And I actually need some suggestions for good live music tonight because I don't have my night planned, and I definitely want to see some good music. So I'll be asking for those later. I just want to get a quick sense of who I'm talking to. How many people here are seniors? And then juniors? Okay. And the rest are freshmen, sophomores. All right. How many people here are performing musicians? Okay, good number of you. All right. So what I want to do today is tell you sort of the story behind Pandora, how we got going, the sort of initial inception of the product, and our sort of very circuitous path to what eventually became Pandora, the web service. And then kind of what the last 3 years have been like and where we see this going forward. I want to sort of put a particular emphasis on kind of the entrepreneurial side of this, because I'm guessing as juniors and seniors, some of you are really thinking ahead about, your vocational prospects and how you might want to get involved in music in some capacity. So I thought that might be a good place to sort of focus. But I'm more than happy to talk about any particular issue or topic around Pandora that you guys really want to discuss. So feel free as I'm chatting away. I'll try to keep my eyes peeled. If I don't see you, yell. Raise your hand, and I will. I'm happy to sort of have a discussion with you. So don't be shy about raising your hand as I'm talking, and I'll pursue any kind of part of this pretty broad subject that you guys might be interested in. So to start off with a quick background on myself, I'm a musician. I went to Stanford. I graduated in 1988. I was a poli-sci major as an undergraduate, which gave me a lot of time to do different things. And when I graduated from college, I had spent a lot of time studying music theory and composition and sort of electronics and music. And I knew that I wanted to stay involved in music in some capacity, but not really sure how. I was not a stellar student by any stretch of the imagination. And when I graduated, my first job was I was a nanny. Actually, Manny is the proper word for it. Where my first gig was taking care of a couple kids. Kids is my other sort of lifelong passion. I had that job and actually held it for about 5 years. It wasn't the job that my parents imagined I was going to get after graduating college. But it was the perfect gig for me because I just worked in the afternoons. I'd pick the family up after school, and we'd go play stickball in the street, and I'd oversee them doing their homework, and I'd cook dinner for the family at the end of the evening, and I'd head home. And the rest of the day was mine to sort of really woodshed on music. And so I really practiced a lot, 6-7 hours a day on the piano, spent a lot of time around sort of recording technology and really kind of honed my chops. Gradually started playing in bands, spent all my 20s pretty much eventually in rock bands, several different rock bands. Did a lot of touring around the Pacific Northwest. Lived out of a van for pretty extended periods of time for a while. That first experience of playing in bands was really the original inspiration for Pandora, which is really, there's this enormous collection of very talented musicians around that nobody knows about, who have no access to any kind of effective form of mass promotion. And so, they're out there, like I was, driving up and down interstates, trying to sort of roust up an audience. And it has its glory and its joy, but it's also very exhausting. And for most musicians, ultimately, doesn't bear fruit. So I spent my 20s doing that. I was then a film composer for a while. So I wrote music for film and commercials, a whole bunch of things. And in my capacity as a composer, I thought a lot about musicology, like how music is created, why people like what they like, in particular film directors. Good film composers, one of the skills you have to develop is the ability to really quickly home in on the musical taste of a film director. And I actually developed this system where I'd sit down with a director and I'd bring a stack of CDs with me, and I'd play music for him or her, and I'd get their kind of thumbs up, thumbs down reaction to the music. And I'd use that information to help me sort of understand what they liked, what they wanted for their movie. Because directors weren't typically musicians. They couldn't really communicate to me in musicological terms, but they could tell me what they liked and didn't like. So I had this kind of very informal taxonomy in my head, this sort of genome in my brain. And I was living in the Bay Area in 1999, which was really the kind of apex of the first big dot-com boom. And a lot of people were starting companies. So most of you were like, I guess, freshmen in high school or something? At least the seniors were. It was like 9 years ago. There was this huge rush of investment money that flew into Silicon Valley, and a lot of companies started, all sorts of businesses, a lot of web-based businesses. And so there was a very strong entrepreneurial spirit around it, and I shared this idea with a friend of mine, which is to sort of take this music profiling that I had used and connect it to technology, and then use it as a recommendation tool over the web to sort of deliver recommendation technology to all these budding music websites. Because what had happened was there were a bunch of music destination sites that were launching CD Now, Ayuma, eMusic, all these places. And they held all this promise for musicians because for the first time, you could be a completely unknown independent musician, but by just joining Amazon or CD Now or CD Baby, you could instantly have sort of global distribution. And so a lot of independent working musicians really viewed this as a huge opportunity. But the problem was these sites became huge repositories of musical catalog, but you were just kind of a needle in a larger haystack. So it was all fine and dandy to be on Amazon's in their music collection, but you were there along with 6 million other CDs, and it was going to be harder even for someone to find you there. So I was watching that happen, and I thought, wow, here's an opportunity. Let's build something to help people navigate these websites and discover all this music. So I shared the idea with a friend of mine, a college classmate, a fellow named John Kraft, who already at that age, just past 30, had already launched his own company and sold it. Had kind of this very can-do attitude about entrepreneurship, and he said, man, that sounds like a cool thing. Let's start a company. So we quickly threw together a business plan. And business plans are really, just telling the story of your business and putting a few facts and figures behind it. And we went out and started pitching investors. And in March of 2000, we raised our first round of what we call seed financing or angel financing to get going, $1.5 million. That was in the, did I just turn on the room? That money got us going. It actually wound up being, we raised that money the first week of March, and the third week of March is when the whole dot-com boom collapsed. So we actually wound up launching this at a really tough time in hindsight. What ended up happening, we took that initial money, about $1.5 million, sort of hired our core team. We rented out a studio apartment in San Francisco in Potrero Hill, and we were all kind of cramped in there, about a dozen or so engineers and musicians, and we started building this core music genome project. Now, let's take you through a quick trajectory, and I'll come back. It took us about a year, sort of mid-2001, we built the sort of prototype of the music genome project. Again, we weren't a radio, weren't even thinking of being a radio, we weren't called even Pandora at the time. But in mid-2001, we just sort of finished that, and we started running out of money. And began in 2001, in order to conserve cash, we started paying our employees a smaller and smaller percentage of their salary. Until by the end of 2001, nobody was getting paid. We used to call it salary deferral in those times. It's actually illegal in California to do that. You can't have people work for you for nothing. So we were violating all sorts of labor codes. And we actually were operating as a company in Oakland, which is the country's most labor-friendly district. So it's not the place you want to be breaking labor codes. But nonetheless, we had about 45 people that then worked for our company for almost 3 years without getting paid, full or part-time. So enormous sacrifice from people. We eventually deferred well over $1.5 million of salary over the course of that time. And that is not an uncommon, that's maybe a little extreme, but that's not an uncommon experience to go through when you start a company. And if any of you wind up doing that, you should prepare yourself for some period of time where things feel pretty bleak, where you really have to kind of dig deep and when you feel there's no light at the end of the tunnel, still keep plugging away. By the end of 2003, I think I had about 11 maxed out credit cards. And I owed friends and family about $200,000. And I had a personal obligation on a 8,000 square foot of office space for 5 years in Oakland. That was the nature of the lease we'd signed. We had to personally guarantee it. So I didn't have any money to start off with. And so I was really looking over a pretty serious financial precipice. We were pretty much as committed as you could get at that time. But we had this huge team of people around us that had sort of, stuck with us and held on and continued to build this core asset, this music genome project, and the sort of technology wrapped around it. And then in 2004, the very, very beginning of 2004, we raised $9 million from a collection of institutional investors. So these are venture capitalists who came in and essentially kind of pulled the company up from a pretty dark place. We paid everybody back. Everybody got their salary back. That was actually a day I will not forget. We would have all-hands meetings back then every couple of weeks, and typically the topic of an all-hands meeting was, can you work for 2 more weeks without getting paid? So they weren't generally joyful occasions. And on this particular all-hands meeting, I just pulled out a big wad of envelopes from the back of in my back pocket and gave everybody these checks, which in some cases was, like 2 years of salary. I think people were a little shell-shocked. Nobody really believed they actually got the money back, because by then I think people had mostly given up. But it was a good moment. We paid everybody back. And then we repurposed Pandora, the Music Genome Project, realized that we were in the wrong business, that we had built this huge piece of intellectual property, and it belonged in a different category, which was radio. So I just want to jump over to talk a little bit about the music genome, so you guys have a sense of what's under the covers at Pandora and what was going on all these years and continues to go on. This is what it looks like at Pandora's offices. These are musicians. We have about 40 of them that work for us now. And their job is to come in every day, about 5 hours a day or so, put some headphones on, and listen to songs and analyze them musicologically along about 400 attributes per song. So these are all trained musicians, folks with a good grasp of music theory. And they actually sit down and use a template, this Music Genome Project template, to capture every sort of minute musical detail of every song. Melody, harmony, rhythm, form, instrumentation, lyrics, vocal performance, vocal harmony, etc. They actually measure it. And this is what they look at. This is one, you can see, of 7 pages of musical detail that an analyst captures for every song. So if you look there, you see the little numbers on each category. They enter numbers to measure each one of these musical dimensions. So on the left-hand column there, that set of a dozen or so attributes, those are all designed just to understand the melody. So whatever kind of melody it is, you can capture it based on some collection of scores along these same attributes, kind of like musical primary colors. So analysts go through, score these songs, and when they're done, they have this 400-gene kind of double helix for a song. So it's really kind of like a musical fingerprint. It'll take, for a 3-minute pop song, about 15 minutes. And for a symphony, it could take 2 hours. So it's tremendously time-consuming. But this team has been working on it for a long time now. And we now have, that's actually 70,000 artists, and now a little over 600,000 songs. And 70% of the music in our collection is independent. So these are artists that are not on record labels. So we've been plugging away at this for a long time. And one of the key dimensions of the Music Genome Project that I think is particularly valuable both for listeners and for musicians is that the Genome Project is blind to popularity. So when you type a song into Pandora to launch a station, when we pick songs, we actually don't know if the artist is well-known or not. We really literally don't know that information. And so it's completely democratic. And we can only do that because we know the musicology of it. So you could be a brand new band. There are a handful of musicians in here. If you sent us a CD, which we welcome, by the way, and there's no prerequisites for inclusion in Pandora. If you send us a CD, you may have, nobody may have heard of you before. You may not have any kind of purchase history or like it may not be yet part of a social network of some kind, where there's data that kind of helps correlate you with other people. So you really are operating in a vacuum. Pandora can take that music and put it in the right spot. So it's a great discovery tool. So someone types in Coldplay that everybody knows, and they can wind up in their station with a bunch of artists that really are very, very obscure, but might share musical similarities with Coldplay. Because what we're doing is literally calculating musical proximity. So there's a mathematical equation when that song goes into Pandora that computes distance, sort of musical distance, between that song and every other song in this collection. And then it sequences the playlist. And then as the playlist is rolling along, you guys can give thumbs up and thumbs down. And you love to give thumbs up, thumbs down on Pandora, we learned. We have about 3 billion pieces of thumb feedback, and it's growing exponentially right now. I think one out of every 4 songs gets a piece of thumb feedback on Pandora. When you thumb a song, there's 2 things that happen to that information. One is we take that thumb and add it to the aggregate user feedback. So we have an idea for everybody who launched a Coldplay station, what you think of each song that we pick in that context. So let's say we play a U2 song on it. If the audience in general thinks that song doesn't belong there by thumbing it down, we'll play it a little less often and vice versa. So we use the thumb feedback on aggregate. But we also take that thumb feedback and try to glean, just like the film composer does with the director, we try to glean what do you mean, and refine your playlist based on musicological information. So let's say you thumb down a handful of songs in a row that had, pretty distorted electric guitar. Maybe we'll notch down the distorted electric guitar and see if that gets better for you. So it's trying to kind of, through technology, replicate the human, the human DJ, the person who really knows your taste and gets better as you use it. And again, that's made possible because of this template that underlies Pandora. So that's a sort of fundamental functioning of the service. And as I said, we have about 600,000 songs. So we wound up in 2004, mid-2004, with this big collection of music. Having failed as a business, essentially, because we had tried to license it to other companies and weren't making any money at it, but it was this really valuable piece of data. And we realized, gosh, this is a great tool to use in generating and manipulating playlists, which is, radio, which has always been the largest part of the music industry. So we completely reinvented the company and ended up launching Pandora. We actually launched Pandora as a paid service in October of 2005, thinking that the business model for this was going to be everybody would pay $3 a month, and we'd deliver it as a subscription business. The deal was actually originally in October, you could listen to 10 hours of Pandora for free, and then you'd be asked for your credit card to register. And what happened was we had this big surge in listenership, but nobody was giving us their credit card. They would just log off, erase their cookies, and get back on for 10 more free hours. It's wholesale dishonesty. And so we realized, though, as much as we'd like to be able to drive subscription business, it wasn't in the cards. And so we went free in November, just 3 weeks after we had been subscription. And then just took off like a rocket ship. So Pandora now has about 25 million, as John said earlier, registered listeners. And we add about 50,000 a day. That's actually growing now. It's the second fastest growing website after Facebook in the first at this period of time. And we've never advertised it. So it's all word of mouth. And my guess is, based on the very warm reception you gave when I came up here, that some of you have told your friends about Pandora. And that's how Pandora grows. We really don't do any advertising. And we let the sort of viral word of mouth phenomenon kind of carry us along. And the larger you get, the stronger that viral sort of momentum gets. And we've kind of been the beneficiary of that. So, and again, please feel free to ask questions as I'm rambling along here. Yeah? Well, I did a lot of that. I actually, the venture pitch in 2004 that eventually landed me that large, what we called Series B, second financing round, was my 348th pitch of Pandora in that 2-year period. So I got used to being told no. And I think that the raising of money, which is something some of you maybe have to do someday, involves a lot of different criteria. I think first and foremost, as an entrepreneur, and if there's one piece of generic advice that I would give to you as undergraduates, first and foremost, it involves the ability to communicate. And you have to be able to get up in front of an audience, like I'm doing now, or to a smaller audience, and be able to really forcefully, energetically convey an idea to people. And if there's one thing I would encourage you to do before you graduate from here, it's learn public speaking. And public speaking doesn't just mean this. Public speaking also means in small groups. And it's a skill that will be useful for you no matter what you wind up doing. But I can tell you that in my experience at Pandora, I have probably spoken in public, thousands of times. And there have been audiences that have been investors, employees, Pandora listeners, press, all sorts of audiences. But learning to speak publicly and convey things forcefully and get people energized around them is probably the single most important skill you can have. Excuse me. And if you want to start a company and you're just too scared of public speaking and that, find somebody who loves to do that, who's a real communicator, make them your partner. Because that is a really key skill. And it's something that I developed over the course of, a number of years presenting the company. That's the first thing. The second thing is, for raising money, you want to find somebody who has some kind of interest or prior interest in the field that you're in. So in our case, the guy who led our Series B was a drummer who was really interested in music and digital music and was looking for ways to get into it. So try to find someone who has some sort of pre-existing interest in your space. And then really it's about, as an entrepreneur, doing as much as you can to prove your idea with each passing week and month while you sort of simultaneously, work with investors and try and get them excited about it. But writing a business plan and starting a company is really not rocket science. I mean, it's something any of you could do. It just involves a lot of hard work and tenacity and creativity. So that's kind of a very general response to your question. But it was certainly, yeah. There's a hand back up there?
Yes, sir. I graduated from here several years ago with a degree in ancient Greek, Latin, and philosophy. However, I'm going to med school next year, and I play the piano and flute. But what I like to do mostly is write lyrics. So I've never published anything.
You said you've never published anything in what?
In anything. I like to write lyrics.
Uh-huh. And you're asking me what you should be doing?
Yeah, I don't know. I went to law school and I quit because I don't like it.
Well, if you're a lyricist and you want to publish music, it sounds like you should connect with someone who writes music, who writes the instrumental side. I'm sorry?
I'm stupid.
I think you're being a little hard on yourself going to medical school. You should hook up with musicians, put some music together. Well, you should keep at it, whatever you're doing, and get it out there. There's lots of opportunities for musicians, no matter what your background. All right. Okay, let me just scoot forward here. I'm actually going to scoot by this and talk a little bit about what's happening in this general space of radio. So, about 7, 8 months ago, we launched Pandora on an iPhone. How many people here have Pandora on their iPhone? Oh, wow, good number. Cool. And I think that, so this was a huge catalyst for us. Almost half of our daily listeners new registered listeners come from the iPhone. And there are some statistics you can see up here. And I think the couple that are really worth noting are the bottom two here, that half the listening is over Wi-Fi. So half the people, when they listen to the iPhone, do it over Wi-Fi. And the reason that's so high is that people are taking the iPhone and they're docking it in various home systems and using their domestic Wi-Fi to pipe Pandora into their home. And a quarter of the people are listening to Pandora in the car. And so it's over iPhone in the car. So what's happening is internet radio that used to be sort of computer radio is now kind of exploding off the PC into all the places that are traditionally the sole domain of broadcast radio. So not only has it sort of caused this pretty dramatic increase in listeners for us, it's also changing, I think, the way people think of internet radio, sort of what it can do. And it's really a viable alternative to broadcast radio. And our goal as a company is nothing short of taking radio as it is right now, the 100 million people that come a week to Clear Channel, and like sliding them over into this new form of radio. And actually, I tried Pandora out in the car for the first time about 4 or 5 months ago. I don't drive very often, and when I was driving along, I had my iPhone plugged in. I was listening to the radio and driving along, thinking, "Wow, this is a pretty good radio station." Then remembered, "Oh yeah, that's right. I curated this thing." And then a song came along that I didn't like, and I reached over and I skipped it. And I went back to driving, and I remember thinking, "Oh my God, I'm in a car. I'm listening to the radio through the car stereo system, and I just skipped a song on the radio." And it was really sort of cognitive dissonance, We all know what it's like in the car, right? Unless you're using your iPod, which is certainly a solution for it, you don't get to interact with the radio. You don't get to, for one, pick a radio station that's really tailored to you, and secondly, actually be able to sort of say no thank you and get a different song on it. And I really had sort of an epiphany in a way at that moment, which is, we are accustomed, when we think of radio, we're accustomed to programmed broadcast radio that I have to tune into. And if I want something personal, I have to bring a portable media player, like an MP3 player of some kind, so that I can hear the songs that I like. Well, what internet does is it actually allows you to bring around personalized radio wherever you go. And it's a very, for you guys, it's probably second nature now, but I think that for most consumers, that's a pretty dramatic change in their listening habits. And for us, it means a world of opportunity opening up in radio, because 40% of radio is in the car, and 40% of radio listening is at home. So we've been playing in a pretty small sandbox so far, and see ourselves expanding much beyond this. In fact, last week we launched Pandora on the Blackberry, we did a soft launch, so didn't actually publicize it very much, and it's really growing really fast. And we're also going to launch pretty soon on a new device made by Palm called the Palm Pre. Has anybody here heard about the Palm Pre? Just a few people? Okay. So Palm is releasing this new device, and they're gonna push it out over Verizon. It's another device like the iPhone. Again, totally, the device is really well designed for this interactive kind of a user interface, and it'll be connected, just kind of another device that will allow us to push Pandora out into more places. Again, really exciting for us, yeah. Yeah, Android, we're keeping our eye on Android. We're a pretty small company now, so we have to kind of focus our efforts and try to really focus on phones that we think are at the right stage of development to have either already have a mass audience or look like they're about to have a mass audience. And we're kind of nibbling around Android, waiting for that moment when we're convinced, now's the timing is good. Eventually, we'll do it for sure. It's a question of when. Yeah. Does anyone have a question? Oh, yeah. So when you log into Pandora, we know what kind of device you're listening to. So whether it's a phone or it's through a Sonos device, we know where we're piping the signal to in terms of device. In terms of the car, that's a result of a survey. So we survey listeners that use the iPhone so we can know when they're listening to it. But yeah. So on the heels of this this rapid phone adoption are connected devices. So everything that's being built now in the home, whether it's a picture frame or it's an alarm clock or a Blu-ray DVD player, they're all connected via Wi-Fi. So they have Wi-Fi chips in them, which means they're all candidates for delivering Pandora. So there are about 70 companies that are all taking Pandora and incorporating them into their devices, so you can get personalized radio, on a big screen TV, or a little alarm, like a Chumby alarm clock, can wake up to Pandora in the morning. Just trying to kind of infiltrate all these different places where people listen to music. So big, fast-growing space. Yeah. Yeah, we would love to be on gaming consoles. Right now, the gating factor for that is that Pandora's not available outside the US. And most gaming consoles are really big global enterprises, and they don't really want to integrate with a company that can only deliver to US listeners. So we're actually, licensing prohibits us from streaming outside the US. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of TBD. Right now, you can buy, music straight from iTunes. It's sort of the principal transaction that happens on Pandora. You can imagine, though, additional features like rewinding, playing some songs on demand, which you currently can't do on Pandora, but allowing that through sort of spur-of-the-moment purchases. So I think the way we think about microtransactions is, as you're listening, if you want to do something a little bit extra that Pandora doesn't typically allow you to do, you can buy it. You can do that right now. You can buy the song through iTunes or Amazon. In fact, we're the top affiliate for both of those websites for selling music. I don't think we want to get in the business of retailing. Yeah. Music retailing is a pretty tough business. We like to have other people take care of that for us, just send people their way. An interesting statistic, it was on the previous slide, but on Amazon, when we sell CDs there, the average sales rank of a CD that we sell on Amazon, so if currently I think U2 is the #1 seller, down the list, our average sales rank for a CD is 140,000. So really, really obscure music. It's stuff that's not really getting bought anywhere else, which is something we really like. Yeah. Going global? Uh-huh. Yeah. We absolutely want to go global. So Pandora, when we launched the service in November of 2005, we were usable overseas. You just had to pretend to be a U.S. resident by typing in, a U.S. zip code. I'll say this again, but our most popular zip code in the first year was 90210 on Pandora. It was growing like a weed. I mean, it was growing faster outside the U.S. than it was growing here. But we had to shut people off. As soon as we get this sort of licensing thing really squared away in the U.S., the next task is to take that and say, okay, we've got a template. We've all agreed on it here. Let's just take this over to the EU and to Australia and the Far East and start, building it overseas. We had so much feedback internationally from people who were using it, and we just can't wait to get back there. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. So licensing is a very obviously central piece of any content company like ourselves, and Pandora pays two forms of license. One is called a publishing fee, which we pay for every song that we stream. It winds up being about 3.5% of our overall revenue. And we pay that to 3 different organizations, ASCAP, CSAC, and BMI, depending on where the artist belongs. So manageable, pretty small fee. The second license fee we pay is called a performance fee. And the performance fee is for the performers. So it gets divvied up like the cowbell player gets some money. I mean, everybody gets a piece of it. And it goes to a company called Soundexchange. Soundexchange is sort of the ASCAP, the sort of digital equivalent of ASCAP. So Soundexchange collects all this money from not just us, but Yahoo and CBS.com, all the webcasters. It collects all the money and then turns around and pays it out to the artists that have joined Soundexchange. So if any of you have CDs out there that are getting played on webcast companies like ours, you have to join Soundexchange. And I think it's free. And Soundexchange currently keeps half the money it collects because it doesn't have mailing addresses for the artists it belongs to. So musicians need to sign up so they can get access to that money. So Soundexchange is a nonprofit, but it essentially represents all the rights holders. And the license that dictates our fee to Soundexchange is called the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. So if you're interested in digital media, you need to get intimately familiar with the DMCA, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. It dictates a whole bunch of the law around our industry. It's the reason that on Pandora, you can't rewind and replay a song. It's the reason why we can't play more than 4 songs by the same artist in a 3-hour period, or you're limited to 6 skips an hour. All those kind of constraints are a function of this Digital Millennium Copyright Act. It also stipulates this performance fee, although not the actual fee itself. It just dictates that every 5 years, that fee is arbitrated by a 3-judge panel in Washington who determine every 5 years what the rate should be. So we actually negotiate. There's a hearing process in Washington where we actually argue before judges on what we think the performance fee should be. And we're on sort of one side arguing for one position. On the other side are labels and artists arguing for another. And the judges are meant to sit there, the arbitration judges are meant to sit there and sort of figure out a compromise, essentially. And sort of hear everybody's perspectives and decide what they think is fair. It's kind of like an arbitration in a divorce. There's the person in the middle, figures out what the fair answer is. Same thing in the Copyright Office. A couple years ago, that ruling came out, and it was really out of left field. It was very unfair for us. And interestingly, the performance fee that we pay for songs, broadcast radio does not pay it at all. So if you're an artist and your song gets played on broadcast radio, you get no performance fee. They pay the publishing fee, but not the performance fee. So internet radio has this kind of pretty substantial disadvantage compared to broadcast radio because we pay this fee. And we've actually had, in the last couple of years, on the heels of this really wildly wrong decision that came out of Washington, we've had to sort of mobilize a big political campaign to get it turned back. And it looks like we're going to get that done pretty soon here, thanks to sort of an enormous amount of political pressure from Pandora listeners. We're actually able to email our listeners, and because when you register, you give us your zip code, we can email you and ask you to call your representative and give you their name and phone number, so you know who to call. So we actually are able to generate a tremendous amount of political opposition. We can actually, if we want to, we could pick any committee member, any committee, senator on the Senate side or House side, and ring their phones off the hook for days and days, because people are really energized about music. They seem to be very willing to, stand up and voice their opinions about it. So we're kind of we straddle the law and legislation because they're so intertwined, and we probably will for, forever. That's kind of the nature of the beast. Yeah, but it's a very complicated area to be in. There's any hands. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the business behind this. So Pandora, the reason Pandora is free is because we support it through advertising. So we have a team of people at Pandora. There are 45 of them in our advertising sales team, so about a third of our workforce. Their job is to go out and sell these advertisements that wrap around the tuner. And one of the things that we were worried about when we launched Pandora as a free service was that most listeners would launch Pandora and then they would minimize it while they did something else. And so you wouldn't actually be looking at it. So you wouldn't be able to advertise to listeners, which would be a big problem for us. We thought we were going to have to build a version of Pandora that looked like an Excel spreadsheet, so you could look like you were working but have Pandora up at work so we could advertise to you. But fortunately, what we found out is that listeners on average interact with Pandora 7 times an hour. And that number has been almost unchanged for about 2.5 years. So you as listeners, you might launch it and minimize it, but you go back to it a lot. You go back to it to thumb songs or to create stations, or maybe you've heard an artist, one of these 70% of our collection that are independent that you've never heard before, and you want to go back and find out who it is. So every time you do that, you maximize Pandora, and then you click, you thumb. When you do that, we know you're there, and we pop up a new advertisement. 7 times an hour. And our whole business revolves around selling those ads at a high enough rate and selling enough of them to pay for the business. And I can tell you sort of right now, in our space and in online more generally, this is called interactive advertising. It's sort of a general category of ads that you can kind of click on and interact with. People who are good at selling these are rock stars right now in the business world, because companies like ours and hundreds of others who are advertising supported need people on board who are good at selling this. So if you're interested in sort of sales and marketing, this is a great field to understand and try and develop some expertise around. We call this a valence or a skin. It's got a big sort of visual ad. And you can do all sorts of interesting things with it. So this is an ad that we did for Trident. And it's a teeth whitening gum. And you can see it has this kind of pasty yellow background. But with each subsequent interaction with the tuner, watch what happens to that background. So each time you go back to Pandora, it gets whiter and whiter until it's whitened your website. And you make the subtle connection to Trident gums. The next time you're walking down the aisle, you're not quite sure why, but you reach for the Trident gum and buy it. But the interesting thing, Pandora's success really depends on effectively marrying advertising to the service. And so we're constantly kind of making judgments, Advertisers want to be very obtrusive. They want to be in your face, so you notice them. But we really want to make sure that our website is respectful and kind of elegant, and that listeners feel that it's, it's the style that they would expect from Pandora. So we have to kind of weigh those things every time we look at an ad campaign. So you'll never see sort of flying toasters on your page on Pandora, or lasso the donkey, whatever those things are. But we have to work pretty hard to kind of make these things both work together. Just a couple different treatments. This is, I think, a really interesting statistic that'll give you a sense of how this radio landscape is changing. So these are Arbitron numbers. Arbitron is the system that measures listenership on radio. So if you're an advertiser and you want to buy on a on a broadcaster, you go to see the Arbitron number, and it tells you, for any given moment in time, if you advertise on that radio, these are how many people are listening. So I don't have New Orleans on here, but let's say Atlanta. The biggest station in Atlanta is V103, and if you put one ad on V103, you'd hit 28, on average, about 28,000 people between the ages of 18 and 49, which is sort of the core age group that advertisers want to reach. And these are the top 3 stations in each market. So you can see Pandora's, in this market's a fair bit smaller than that, but if you put one ad on Pandora, in a week, we'll reach that same number of people, just one ad. And the big difference here is this, which is in broadcast, where you're sending one signal out, it's sent out sort of instantaneously to everybody who's listening, and then you're done, sort of in a broadcast world. In unicast, which is our world, one-to-one, we can wait until the right person logs in, listens, and then deliver them the advertisement. So it's very targeted and it's much more efficient. So we wait one by one until these 19,936 people log into Pandora to send them this advertisement, the 18 through 49-year-old age range. And we have zip codes, so we know how to do this. And forgive me if I'm getting into too much of the sort of business side of this, but this is how the world is changing in music. And advertising money is going to start flowing into this business. So I think as members of this world, whether you're performers or you are entrepreneurs running advertising-supported businesses, or you're someone who wants to manage acts or get involved in this, these are the dynamics you really need to understand, because it's changing the entire complexion of the industry. This is just an audio campaign where we targeted women in their 30s within 5 miles of different Whole Food stores with different messages. So it's just a way of delivering advertising that's a little different than before. American Idol campaign. I'm sure you're all big fans. I actually did an audio campaign for this. So there's an audio message, and then you can click through to the website. I'm missing a slide here. I've screwed up my slides today. I'm not sure why. One of the things so I'm applying here to advertising, but you could take that same functionality and apply it to the musicians themselves. So there will be a time on Pandora when you'll be listening and a song will roll by and you'll thumb it up. And when that happens, a prompt will pop up saying, you like that band? They're playing at Tipitina's on Thursday. Or, you like that band? There's a band that sounds like them that's playing at Tipitina's on Thursday that you'll also like. And then one step further, that band, let's say it's this very independent band, first time in New Orleans, nobody knows who they are. But Pandora knows that in the last 6 months, there have been 150,000 people in New Orleans that thumbed up a song by that band when they heard it. If they had opted into an email, we could let them all know the band's coming to town. So you can target all the information. So as a listener, you get really interesting information, targeted information. As a band, you solve the single toughest problem, which is how do you let people know that you're coming? And when I was in bands all those years, our idea of local promotion was get to town 6 hours early and run around stapling posters to telephone poles. That just doesn't work. Where in this world, you're putting a whole new set of tools at the disposal of musicians. And I think it's both great for musicians, and I think listeners appreciate it too, because you get a much more effective discovery mechanism for connecting with music. And again, I think that, in this country, most people, as they get older, probably true all over the world, but as they get older, they don't lose their love of music, they just can't connect with it as easily. And they don't want to take the risk of going out on a Thursday or Friday night, and actually in New Orleans you can't go wrong, but in most cities, when you go out on a night to go hear a club, it's hit or miss. You might waste the night because you don't like the music at all. If you could reliably know that you'll like the music you're going to hear, I think people will get out and get much more engaged. So, our goal as a company is to build a musician's middle class. That's what we want to do. We want to take these, how big is it? I don't know, 10,000, 20,000 musicians, and through Pandora, surface that music to a huge audience and let that audience know when they're coming to town, or sort of all the, enable that audience to become patrons of the band. And I think that there's an appetite for that amongst listeners, and Lord knows there's enough talented artists around, to affect something like that. So, there will come a time on Pandora when, as a musician, the day your song gets added to Pandora is the day you quit your day job, because that song instantly gets blasted out to a billion-person global audience, but just to the people that like your music. It's like instantly they hear about this new artist they've never heard before, and they can kind of engage with you and help kind of support you as a musician. Does that make sense what I'm saying so far? I'm on a bit of a soapbox, but I think that there's a real tremendous opportunity to change an industry it's been this narrow funnel that's only allowed a small number of musicians to squeeze through and turn it upside down and give people access to this huge sea of really talented musicians around there. And that's really our mission as a company. And we will not rest until that's done. So I'm not watching time, so I'm 5 more minutes. Okay. Any other questions I can answer? Any particular things I had that, yeah? For me? Yeah, I find new stuff all the time. It's my source of new music now. I've been listening a lot to one of my sort of richest discovery stations is Ben Folds right now. He introduces me to a huge range of artists I've never heard before, because his musical genome is right in the center of my target for musical. Actually, one of the features we're working on Pandora is the ability not just to thumb up or thumb down an artist, but to be able to thumb up or thumb down an attribute. So you could say, I really like the sound of the singer, or I really like the bass guitar solo, or I don't like the lyrics. So you could refine your stations more granularly than just how many people would be interested in a feature like that? Okay. You know, we did a little study actually a little while ago where for a few thousand people, every time they thumbed up or down a song, we put up a little prompt with the question why. So we just wanted to see how would people who thumb up and thumb down songs articulate the reasons they liked it or didn't like it. We wanted to collect some feedback there. One of the person's answer to they had thumbed down a song, and when we prompted them to ask why, their answer was, "Come on, man, it's Journey," was their thumb down answer. So we're going to have a "Come on, man, it's Journey" feature on Pandora eventually. I see a hand up there? Yeah. Actually, genres too. Mm-hmm.
Have you thought about including I want to listen to Jay-Z and the Strokes station?
Oh, to like a double-seeded thing? No, we haven't actually thought of that. It's interesting. We do. You can multi-seed stations. You can multi-seed stations, but not quite like that yet. But that's an interesting idea. Yeah. Uh-huh. You mail it to us. If you have it here right now, I'll take it home with me. But you can send it in. There's a mailing list. It's very straightforward. Just send us a CD, and there's a little form to fill out, and we'll listen to it. So the performance royalty, the best way to think about it is how much we pay per hour. And we pay about 2 cents an hour. And they're typically around 15 songs an hour. So you divide 2 cents by 15. That's how much you make per song. So it's a really small amount of money per song. But Pandora pays tens of millions a year in music licensing just for the performance fee. Because we played 1 billion hours of music last year. So it's a lot of, it's a lot of revenue. It gets dispersed pretty widely, but it's growing. So yeah, it's a pretty significant cost for us, though. Yeah. About 6 weeks.
6 weeks is how long it takes?
Yeah, that's the backlog right now. Yeah. Yeah. So we have, 600,000 songs. I think we have about, maybe that's 200,000 CDs. It's all stored. We have multiple file formats for all that music. The biggest capacity for us is streaming capacity because we play so much music. We stream about half the amount of data that YouTube streams every day in music, but they do that in video. But in terms of streaming capacity, we're one of the biggest streamers in the world. I think the second or third largest streamer in the world now. And that's a large streaming facility that's housed in a bunker in Santa Clara in California, like literally like a military bunker. They repurpose military bunkers for these co-location facilities. So like earthquake-proof, fire-proof, everything. Yeah, it's pretty wild. Mm-hmm.
When an artist submits their work to Pandora, do you give them any feedback on how many people like their
when it's in Pandora and it's playing, you mean? We don't do that formally. We have artists that'll write in and we'll give them information. Eventually, we want you to be able to log in and actually look that up. So provide a system for artists to actually go in and, not only see which songs are getting thumbed up and thumbed down, but we could even potentially take all of your thumbs feedback and plot it on a map. So as an artist, you could look at the map of the US and we could tell you where the people are that like your music. So you could, steer your van in that direction. Yeah, it's really hard to do because we don't have locale for bands. Like we don't have a hometown data field for artists. And I think it would be pretty tricky because artists often come from multiple places. It's sometimes hard to regionalize them, but we don't have that metadata. So we don't have that capability right now, unfortunately. Yeah. Only what you saw there. I had to kill you if I sent you more than that. Yeah, it's confidential right now. Someday, and Pandora is used right now in lots of schools, all sorts of different places, and we imagine one day that we'd open up the genome and make it available as an open source thing and let people have at it. But for right now, we've got to be kind of protective of it. But eventually, yeah.
You said you have about 45 musicians who rate
Yeah.
criteria for all of the music you have. How do you put bias on that?
Yeah.
How do you accurately steal that? Because let's say someone likes funk a little more, and then they get past the symphony because it's their job, they have to do it.
Yeah, it's a good question. So typically for human-based systems, you have the problem of bias. So the analysts get trained. They go through about 100 hours of training just to get started. And that is all about generating a very strong consensus around what each attribute means, and within each attribute, what each score means. We analyze one analyst per song, but we also do 10% of the songs twice. So we're constantly kind of lining up and comparing two different analysts analyzing the same song. And the data is really remarkably consistent, because we're actually not trying to ask for people's opinions. We're really trying to measure stuff. One of the reasons lyrics on Pandora, our analysis of lyrics is actually not super deep. And it's partly because it's very hard to generate a consensus around what lyrics mean. So we could all listen to a song together, but we'd interpret the lyrics very differently, and it would be very hard to train people to agree. But with everything else, we've done, I think, a pretty good job of, kind of beating people's individuality out of them, so they can really kind of get Orwellian, get consensus on this stuff. But, yeah.
You talk about the emergence of a musician's middle class, and I wanted to know, is Pandora going to change as an application that's going to be more suited towards like artist tools? Because I know you're collecting all this valuable data that I would love to have and be able to use. And so I'm wondering, is Pandora going to stay as a radio service primarily, or are you going to open up into more of doing the analytics like something like a top spin or something like that?
Well, we'll always be focused as a company on radio, but we'll make all those tools available to musicians. I mean, we will eventually allow musicians to tunnel in and look at all the stuff that's happening on the website and make use of it. I mean, in the long run, that's our part of our mission as a company. So we just have to sort of get profitable first, and then start doing that. Yeah, we aren't going to ask for musicians for money. That's a losing battle. Sorry. Thanks very much, everybody.